Welcome, everybody. This is the Tuesday, May the 13th, 2025 session in our series on entrepreneurship in Asian high-tech industries. Always start by saying thanks to our member companies of the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center, because it's their support that allows us to put on these programs, including some light refreshments after the session is over today. Next week, we have an even bigger session after our regular seminar. We have a party where we invite our alumni once in the fall and once in the spring. So that's going to be next Tuesday after the session. And hope you'll stay afterward and get to meet each other, get to meet some alumni, get to meet some of our other business contacts. Also, I should probably announce that Tuesday, May 27 will be the last session in this series. We will not have a class for those of you who are registered or a seminar on Tuesday, June the 3rd. So May the 27th is the last day. As we're going through and looking at what's going on in not only in Asia and different regions, but in different kinds of industries, we're very fortunate today to have a speaker with us from Hong Kong who can talk to us about biosciences and life sciences industries. So with me is Mr. Kingsley Leung, and Kingsley is the chairman of the Uni-Bio Science Group and also co-founder of and a board director of Great Bay Bio and Dot Bio. He is over 15 years of experience in biotech, involves licensing deals in areas such as oncology and inflammation, respiratory drugs. He also has extensive financial industry experience. He was doing healthcare investment banking for Merrill Lynch. He has worked with family offices. He has done evaluation of IPO opportunities for companies across the US and China. He's received a number of awards in his career: World Outstanding Young Leader Award, the Entrepreneur Award from Capital in 2017, Young Industrialists Award of Hong Kong in 2020. And he is a chartered financial analyst and member of the Hong Kong Society of Financial Analysts. He came to this path from the technical side, getting his Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry from Imperial College in London, and then his Master of Science in Pharmaceuticals from University of Oxford. He also has an EMBA from Tsinghua University and INSEAD in their joint program. So Kingsley, I've given the facts, or some of them. How did you describe your own story? How did you get to where you are today?
Firstly, thank you for having me, everyone. It's a great turnout. Obviously, it's actually one of my dreams to be here, sitting in Stanford, right? So, as Richard already mentioned, I'm a scientist by training. And then because back at my days, there wasn't really as many opportunities in tech or STEM in Hong Kong. So I actually had to pursue a career in investment banking. Actually, most engineers that come from Imperial or come from Oxford or scientists, right, when they come back home, if they're based in Hong Kong, they start their career in finance, right? That's the most lucrative. But of course, we went through the 08-09 kind of crisis, right? You know, banking wasn't as good and as lucrative as it used to be. I think this is one of the reasons why actually Hong Kong later on I'll talk about as well. They're starting to, change and kind of redirect and diversify the kind of industries that they are in. So, but particular for myself, as Richard mentioned, I was in the finance industry for 3-4 years. I think the key reason is because I needed to learn more about the financial IQ, understand how financial markets work. I had no idea how it works. It's all jargons, as many of you might know if you don't study business. So that's why I embarked on getting my CFA as well. And eventually I decided that finance is really not my thing, right? So I left Joined this startup in Singapore for 3 years, mainly because with my background in finance, my understanding of kind of deal structures, I went into business development and specifically, as Richard mentioned, in licensing of products. And at that time, we in-licensed oncology, immunology, top assets from the West, and then developed them in clinical sites within Asia, right? Because the clinical development and a lot of development for biomedical drugs of sort are very cheap, but the quality is very high, especially in Asia, in sites like Australia and China and in Singapore today. So this model was quite hot for a little while. There are really good companies that came out from this. One is like Zai Labs, and the other was Beijing. Those were some big names, right? I worked in a specific company called Azan Pharmaceuticals, which eventually, due to various reasons, it's no longer. But I supported the in-licensing of 4 products from companies like Pfizer, BMS. Those are the bigger names inside within the US, and then Almirall, which is a Spanish company, which is great. I get to spend a lot of time in Barcelona, very nice, and also Australia, CSL. And I supported. Eventually, they listed in Taiwan, and they then dual listed in Nasdaq afterwards. So I left that company and eventually joined. I think what we would talk more about my family business, which is Uni-Bio. It does say serial entrepreneur, but there is another way of saying this because my family business, Uni-Bio, we're a very traditional, vertically integrated company in China, doing just as it's an R&D all the way to manufacturing, sales, and marketing of you could say specialty generics in areas such as metabolic diseases, dermatology, and ophthalmology. The company wasn't really well run. And eventually I took over the realms in 2017.
Can I interrupt for
Yes.
a second? So when you decided to study biochem at Imperial, were you already thinking of ultimately being in charge of like the family business?
So I have many parts of my family business.
Yeah.
So we also do cosmetics and we also do fine chemicals, but pharma is definitely a new area. I think it's a bit of both. Knowing that there's something in the end, I think does help me. But I think ultimately, when I was in high school, when I was in university, I had a very intense passion for chemistry and biology. These are two things I really enjoyed, right? And especially there's all the protein crystallology, the 3D kind of structure now can be used AI to do, right? But these are areas I was very interested in, and I wanted to pursue a kind of a path in drug development, if not in biochemistry, because that's the idea, being able to use science to help people. I think that was the ultimate goal, right?
But wound up taking the reins of the entire group in 2017.
Yeah, so I took over in 2017. As I said, was very poorly managed. Later on, I can also share a little bit about that journey. But eventually, I grew the company from it was like loss making. We were making around, revenue wise, we had like $10 million US, 10 million around of revenue. Now, last year, because it's publicly traded, we're close to 100 million, so a 10x the sales, right? It's now. We've been making a profit for the last 3 years, cumulatively net cash in terms of cash flow. So very healthy. But I think the entrepreneurial part came into 2 areas. Actually, so I did my EMBA in Tsinghua and NCI, right? And I don't know if anyone have heard of ETA, right? Maybe it's called differently, but it's entrepreneurial through acquisition, right? So it's specific. Most people start companies from scratch, right? But ETA, you can. It is a area where MBA students, they decide to buy maybe even older assets or over. They create a syndicate of investors, and then they go buy these kind of maybe poorly run companies, or at least like old industries that might not have like someone to take over, right? Or so that is kind of something that a lot of people are doing in Europe. At least I don't know them in the US, right? I'm sure there are as well, right? So I applied the very similar concept where for my company, Uni-Bio, we had good assets. I don't think they were fairly reflected on our share price. And I got a couple of friends, some investors, outside investors. We created a syndicate. And we actually broke the company in practically 4 parts, practically. So we have the original company, which is now, as I mentioned, 100 million in sales. It's making profit 3 years in a row. And then we have Uni-Bio, which is the company which I'm now focused mainly on, which is later on I'll talk about. We're utilizing artificial intelligence in speeding up drug development. This is something that's quite hot right now. And then there's another asset company that has like a long-acting anemia product that is mainly focused in China. I actually sold that company last week, so I'm quite happy. So that's quite new. Very, very happy about that. And then there is another company that is actually more a real estate company. Now, there's a really nice piece of asset, a land in prime Shenzhen. If you guys been to Shenzhen, it's a bustling place right now. We were able to kind of privatize that, and now we're hoping to develop that separately. So through that process, I think I unlocked a lot of value. And of course, I'm still running or trying to run all 4 companies at the same. Well, one, it's already sold, but I spend now most of my time kind of on the boards of most of these companies. And I do dabble into investment. So Richard, you mentioned about Uni-Bio. It's an investment that I made into a nanobody company based in Singapore as well, right? So that's something that I do, and I do investments here and there as well. But most of my time right now is put into my startup, which is kind of like my baby, because all the other companies are quite stable now. Uni-Bio, and this is one of the reasons why I'm in the US. Okay, so as I mentioned, Uni-Bio is a company that utilizes artificial intelligence in R&D. So as you know, drug development is a very long process, 10, 15 years. Normally one molecule would take around, some people say 1 billion, but there are actually literature that say around up to $3 billion US, right? And there's a lot of parts to it. One part is the scale-up part, which is the bioprocessing part. And I think historically speaking, I think even though we are in a very high-tech industry, actually a lot of ways of kind of drug development is very old. It's a lot of blind screening. It's not very data-driven. And that's one of the reasons why you have a lot of, especially in the Bay Area, a lot of AI discovery companies that are coming around. But we're kind of downstream to them. We actually, once you have a good candidate product, you still need to scale it up to a certain level so that you can do clinical trials. Otherwise, you are stuck with lab scale kind of molecules, right? Which is very hard to do those kind of patients per se, right? So that process, the scale-up process historically takes around 18 to 24 months. Our mission is to kind of speed that up by 50%, right? And then reduce the cost. Yeah.
So first of all, kind of jumping back a little bit,
yeah.
I'm really glad that you mentioned ETA.
Yeah.
Because this is something that we see once in a while here. It's not taught in entrepreneurship very much. Actually, it's got some things that might be easier, but some things that are definitely harder than just starting something, in your own garage.
Yeah.
But some of the more successful companies that you see around Asia in consumer products, we had the founder of Airweave come and speak one time, and it was a factory that his uncle owned, and he repurposed it to making kind of 3D fabric.
Yeah.
And this was just one of those things where it takes something that people have already invested years, if not an entire generation into. How did your family relations change when you basically did a leveraged buyout and then split it into the 4 companies?
I think that they were very supportive.
Okay.
Very supportive, right? Because I practically said we'll make a lot more money. I think everyone's quite happy. Why not, right? So it was easy to convince.
Yeah. And then the company that's doing AI and drug development, that's Uni-Bio.
Yeah.
And we do see these companies that are using artificial intelligence to kind of reduce the number of possible vectors or reduce the number of compounds or, the compound application mix. To take a problem with really millions of variables and kind of prioritize solutions to this. Are you involved in that process, or you pick up things that have gone through that process and now they have to go through actual clinical trial and be manufactured?
Yeah, I'm kind of more on the kind of latter part. So
Okay.
before clinical trials, right after discovery.
So you pick them up typically before clinical trial.
Yeah, and then we have to scale it up because, as I mentioned, you need to be able to create that protocol to reliably manufacture. You're not manufacturing toys which you can inspect, right?
Yeah.
You need to. The idea is you have to create that kind of protocol to be able to manufacture something you can't see consistently, and that's what we call CMC or scale up processes, right?
So for you, what's the sweet spot? How many years to commercial delivery do you look for?
Oh, so as I mentioned, that specific point takes around 2 years, as in 1 and 18 months, 2 years. So we hopefully we're still kind of we've only been around for 6 years. We raised around 30 to 40 million US dollars. So it's a relatively I would say relatively new company. But we have products or technology platforms out there that have a lot of market validation as well to show that, at least for example, our flagship product, which is what we call a cell line development. This is a process which is upstream CMC. Now we're going into very detail. That process normally takes around 3 to 6 months. At least we claim we can do it within 1.5 months. But speed is one thing, but we also have other kind of, we say that we de-risk the whole process, right? And of course, we're not expensive because we are still a relatively considered a Chinese company. So, so overall, I think in that sense, we do have some technology platforms that are already validated in the market, and we're trying to access the U.S. market.
So that involves a certain kind of the same skills that you were using when you were doing in-licensing.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe at a different stage. Do you take the compound through clinical trials, or
we don't
hand it off?
Yeah, you can say that we're more like a tools company. We provide you with the tools to do things faster. You can say it that way.
Got it.
Ultimately, you like my tool, then you license it, right? And then that's where our recurring income starts coming in.
Okay. So this is AI enabled.
Yep, AI enabled.
How is the kind of labor force for getting people to do your work?
Oh, it's of course with AI the efficiency is much higher. So for example, the cell line development, not only that part I said it takes around 3 to 6 months, right? Normally,
where's the company based?
It's based in Hong Kong. It's based in Hong Kong.
In the city, or
there's a science park.
In the science park.
There's a Hong Kong Science Park. But most
of near Chinese university.
Yeah, most of it of our R&D, but it's still based in Dongguan, which is a southern city within the Greater Bay Area. I can talk a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, for FTEs, normally traditional process takes 2 FTEs for one project. We believe we can do 2 projects with 1 FTE. So we are increasing it by 4x in terms of efficiency, right? So a very small team of 2 people can do around 24 projects, I would say, a year, right? Each project can be up to like $2 million US per deal. But actually, no, sorry, scrap that. That's around $500,000 to $1 million a deal, right? So you can imagine kind of the output is very high, right, for just 2 FTEs, right? Yeah.
And do you have a separate company that's doing manufacturing still?
No, we practically work with CDMOs, which is kind of the manufacturing stuff. Yes. We want to keep ourselves quite asset light in that sense.
Now, thank you for that, because it is kind of a complicated, upstream in the supply chain. And to understand how these compounds get into the pathway of clinical trial is something that's good to understand, especially on an international scale. Now, your customers are they probably going to try to do clinical trials in the US, or will they go somewhere else?
I think depends. I think it depends on which phase. I think, for example, phase 1s, normally customers would do it in Australia because it's just much cheaper. You can still get the Caucasian patient population, and practically it's recognized globally in terms of the quality. But when you get to phase 2, especially for more international big companies, they need to include US sites, Asia sites, and of sorts. So I think it really depends, right? But most of my clients, I would say, are right now, we're still very early on, and kind of we have the product markets fit. At least we know from the Chinese market. I think for US, we still need to be a little bit. We're considered like complete and nascent, very new in it, or like new entrants. So we're doing that very typical kind of initial engagement, trying to figure out our marketing slogan, our communication, and there's a lot of noise in the US as well, right? It's very hard. And finding the right customer persona, and then trying to go in and do my alpha, beta. We're doing that kind of funnel diagram for as we speak right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
And on your investment side, this nanobody company that you have invested in,
Yeah,
that's another Singapore company? Where is
that's
that?
a Singapore company.
Okay.
Yes.
So
they recently got accepted into the San Francisco J&J labs. So
okay. Okay. So
okay.
your investment was done pretty much personal as an angel, or
Personal.
are you okay?
Very
Okay.
personal.
Yeah. So how does the land look for bio-related industries in the whole Pearl River Delta area?
Yeah.
You know, it used to be that you had a lot of small manufacturing on the other side of the border in southern China.
Yeah.
A lot of that really got hurt in 2008, 2009.
Yes, yes, yes.
What's happening now?
Yeah, I mean, I just want a show of hands who's actually been to Hong Kong or who's actually from Hong Kong. Okay, okay, one person is from Hong Kong. Okay. Firstly, I don't represent the Hong Kong government or in any way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Nor do I support, am I part of the Hong Kong Science Park, right? But we are part of the Hong Kong Science Park company. So
You read from them.
Yeah, I ran from them, but they are very supportive in terms of Hong Kong science side. So I think Hong Kong is definitely, as I mentioned at the start, they're changing drastically, right? For many reasons, I think now that Hong Kong is losing its status, I would say, very carefully losing its status as a financial hub for many reasons, right? Mainly geopolitical reasons. I think the government knows that we need to be able to diversify our industries, right? I think Hong Kong, one of the biggest issue, of course, is I can be very vocal about this, but it's just like the youth, they don't have enough money to live in the country. The cost, the what do you call it? The cost of living is very expensive, right? Rental, food, everything. If you're not working in, like, let's say the top industries of law or finance, right, it's very hard to survive. And as these, I would say, sunset industries, at least in China, Hong Kong, I would say, are starting to die because of AI or other reasons, right? As I said, right, geopolitical reasons. I think there is more of a need to diversify. Another reason, of course, is there are now real estate used to be one of the key income sources for Hong Kong, land sales especially, right? That's one of the reasons why our residential and our real estate is the highest in the world after Monte Carlo. I think that's the other one. Mainly because it's very, if you think it's very capitalistic in thinking, we need to drive the prices of real estate so that, you know, the Hong Kong government can get more money so that we can get a very low tax. So our tax is extremely low, just like Singapore, right? So to support that. So it's a system that supports the low tax. But as I said, real estate is also kind of because, you know, China has less money to kind of funnel the money down and buy real estate as well. So these are other driving forces.
Well, and to a certain extent, I got to say, Shenzhen is an incredible competitor.
Yes, and Shenzhen, the cost of living is much lower, and there's people actually leaving Hong Kong to actually live in Shenzhen as well, right? So various reasons where you can see that. I think this year or the last year, this is one of the first years in Hong Kong history we have a deficit. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, and this is, and I think for the foreseeable future, right, I think there might be a deficit going forward. So
this diversification of industry, certainly the government policymakers must be working on this really hard.
Yeah.
Is it kind of driven from government policy, or are you seeing a lot of what I would call bottom up or from private sector?
I do think that there are a lot of top down kind of policies that are coming around. Hong Kong in the past, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, no one would talk about startup. Everyone's kind of at least talking about it, right? And there's a lot of reasons because I just said the government is really pushing. There's a lot of policies which I can share. Right, there's a lot of money around. Right, for example, um, so one of the biggest changes to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, right, is that we've now have 18A and 18C. So 18A is a new kind of listing requirement where pre-revenue companies can list. It's very similar to NASDAQ. That hasn't been so in the history of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, right? That was a major change, and that was a very rare major change, right? And now there's like different weight classes, which is more in line with other companies, right? But that's one, right? Now they have 18C, right, which is really for other innovative companies that have a lower requirement than the kind of the main board listing, right? So these are to support innovation, right? They're changing these type of policies. Now, from a government kind of funding point of view, there are a lot of money around, right? For example, they've quite recently formed what we call the Hong Kong IC, so Investment Corporation. So this is like kind of our sovereign fund. So if you've been to Singapore, you've probably heard of like Temasek or GIC, right? This will be kind of our equivalent. And I think they're releasing, so I don't know the official numbers, but I think 2.5 billion US dollars in the next 18 months. So there's a lot of capital deployed. And from a government budget point of view, I think there's like 10 billion Hong Kong dollars, which is around 1 to 2 billion that is allocated to support Hong Kong Science Park and Cyberport. These are two hubs within Hong Kong to support startups there, right? So definitely there are a lot of money top down because, and I think that's really important because culturally speaking, I think it's very important. This is probably the biggest disadvantage of Hong Kong yet, is that I think we still don't have that culture of risk-taking and entrepreneurship. This requires like 1 or 2, if not 3 generations to build, right? And that requires maybe the government to start coming in first and just providing the kind of the safety net and the kind of the rules and the kind of the resources for everyone to play before, everyone is there. Right?
So how about the labor? Especially, there's a few big companies related to AI in Hong Kong since time.
Yeah, since time. Yeah.
But in your business, do you think you might have trouble getting AI experts, or is the labor force good for this kind of new area?
I would say there are a lot of. I think compared to Shenzhen, for AI talents, Shenzhen is amazing. So a lot of people will put their kind of the engineers and the back and kind of technical stuff either in Shenzhen, or if you want to, you can go to Taiwan as well. Taiwan is not too bad as well. Hong Kong, there are a couple of advantages, especially for, I would say, more high-end, very C-level hires, mainly because now there's like talent schemes as well. Hong Kong trying to attract talents. They can give you within 2 or 3 years Hong Kong identity, right? Which is very big for Chinese people who hold a Chinese passport. Because holding a Chinese passport still requires there's still a lot of restrictions to travel. In Hong Kong, you don't have that restrictions. So being able to come to Hong Kong, kind of become a Hong Kong citizen, right, is a very big advantage to a lot of maybe the senior scientists from China. And even from around the world, Hong Kong's still a very international city, right? So it's one of those cities that it's very bustling in terms of that because we're a financial hub, but you travel maybe just 30 minutes and you're like in Phuket practically. It's very nice beaches, very nice, very quaint. We have the nicest hiking trails there, as well as because Hong Kong, in terms of vicinity, we're 3.5 hours in travel to all the big cities. Right?
Oh yeah.
Tokyo, Beijing, Taipei, Singapore, Thailand. So whether it's for business or pleasure, it's a great place to be, right? So a lot of international talents come, but I would say more on I think the C level or a little bit higher, that would be easier to attract. But you're talking about just the
fresh out of university.
Yeah, fresh out of university.
AI coders, whatever.
A little bit harder, I would say.
Okay. Actually, one thing I'm thinking about that is you're saying that the risk-taking culture hasn't quite developed in the same way as it has in other places, but international trade and finance has always involved risk. It's just involved risk at large scale, and kind of, I would say, rather hierarchical societies that are developed to manage the risk. And I'm kind of curious in this sort of transition. Used to be that parents in Hong Kong really wanted their kids to get prestige jobs in prestigious companies.
Yeah.
I actually had a student who came by my office one time who didn't know how to explain that she had been accepted to the PhD program in economics at UCLA because her parents expected her to go to medical school.
Yeah.
And, this is, so how is this attitude starting to shift now? What's pushing the kind of interest in entrepreneurship?
So, I mean, you see the typical Asian stereotype: doctors, lawyers, and bankers, especially doctors and lawyers, right? This is specifically in Hong Kong. We have that as well. I think, especially doctors, you're very well protected in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Actually, make a lot more money compared to even Singapore, right? So, but it's very, very hard to become a doctor in Hong Kong, right? So it's very stable. You're practically well paid, right? So a lot of parents, of course, would love their kids to be there. But I think this is not unique to Hong Kong. I would say that things are changing for sure, for a couple of reasons. I think firstly, driven by change and uncertainty, especially driven by the AI. AI and automation, these are kind of the key things that might replace and create redundancies, especially in law and finance, right? Even for doctors per se, right? That's one. And I recently, so I'm part of organizing a young presidents organization. A lot of parents there, very family friendly kind of organization. And we went to, a seminar. And the first thing these parents talk is like, how do we teach our next generation, right? No one has a good idea of how. And everyone's top of mind is, how is AI impacting kind of education and the future of jobs, right? So this is definitely top of mind for a lot of parents in Hong Kong. That's one. I think, especially startups, I think it's now starting a new company, right? It's starting to kind of grow it on parents as well. I think success breeds this inspiration. There are lots of successful companies that you mentioned already. Sense Time is one. So my friend is a founder of Lalanwu, which is practically one of the largest last mile logistic company. Very insanely profitable and also successful, especially in Southeast Asia. That's from Hong Kong. There's another company, let's say DGI, originally that's from Hong Kong, but you've probably seen the drones everywhere. So that's a huge company as well. And there are a lot more I can do that. So these successes definitely create.
Those are new successes.
Yeah, they're new successors. Yeah. So there are a lot of good case studies that actually support startups, right? I think that's number one. And the last thing is the government support, right? They're creating that ecosystem, which I talked about, the IPO, kind of at least the route, the support from the budgets. There are a lot of things that the government is planning to do as well to further support startups in the region. Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I think it's interesting, DKI and Sense Time and the other companies that you mentioned, is because one feature of Asian business that's very clear in Hong Kong is the giant family group.
Oh, okay.
And I'm thinking of things like Jardine Matheson and Leung. And these huge groups typically have family foundations that, if they're not the formal board of directors, they're kind of a shadow board of directors about any kind of major spending of money from the groups, for sure. How is that playing a role in the kind of development of more new style entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I think this is very unique to Hong Kong. I'm not sure about, or Asia, I would say, right? I don't know about the US, right?
No, it's not just Hong Kong. I mean, you could go to Bangkok and find the same kind of groups.
But we do have very high density of family offices, as we call them, right? Some of these family offices are third generation, fourth generation, even some fifth generation, and they're insanely wealthy families, right?
Yeah.
And I think when people talk about family offices, maybe they think, oh, they're not very sophisticated. But I have to say, these companies are very rich. They actually have very big multi-family offices, not family offices. So they're getting more and more sophisticated. So there are names like such as Morningside, which is part of the Hang Lung family, Namfeng. They're specifically for our industry, right? Biosciences. They have a dedicated fund, right? If within their kind of structure, just for a specific sector or vertical, right? So
So they're a source of capital.
They're definitely a source of capital. They're getting more and more sophisticated. I think family offices, especially for startups, I think there are a couple of unique opportunities, especially for early stage startups I can share. Number one, they're normally the bosses of all the top institutional investors, right? Most of, let's say, the Sequoias or the big names, they have money, if not significant money, from these family offices. So, especially if you're an early stage startup, kind of leveraging on that kind of relationship, just getting the foot in the door with these kind of, let's say, is much easier through the family offices, right? Practically, they're their bosses, right? So, I've done that many, many times, right? So, leveraging on kind of our very early stage family offices to kind of get into the doorsteps of like Bill Houses and all those investors, right? That's number one. I think number two, unlike a lot of institutional investors, which hold a big portfolio and they always claim that they will try to cross-pollinate, right? It's very difficult for them to do it because they only hold a very minority shareholding of these companies, right? Even though they try, right? They try really hard. But family offices are different. They either have voting control or they actually have control of these companies, right? So they want to see you succeed. So then normally they would actually strongly nudge their kind of corporate companies to work with you, right? And we have an example where Uni-Bio, we are invested in by a very well-known Singapore family office, and we're trying to get a partnership with one of their F&B kind of companies, right? A very large F&B. So this is very unique that family office can also provide.
Do you have any advice for companies, startups, or entrepreneurs that might be considering trying to go to a family office?
Oh yeah. Generate a good relationship. So
okay,
break with them, party with them, do whatever with them, right? But I do think that, and that was the third point I wanted to put. I think family offices, you can generate a really long-lasting friendship with them, right? Obviously they want to see the financial returns, right? But their kind of the viewpoint is much longer. So so it's actually more suitable for startups, with especially ones that take a little bit longer to actually to get to a liquidity event, right? And a lot of these guys, they just want to as well. They want to meet, learn. They want to talk to more people, right? So they like forming these long-term friendships with founders. So I think that's another thing, because like work for institutionals, a lot of time, they work for that company for 3-4 years and they jump ship to another one. So it's completely different kind of dynamics. So I think those are an interesting group of investors that is very different, and there are ways to leverage that type of investor group.
So a great question came in from Zoom in regard to kind of government support or community support for entrepreneurial activities. What are the roles of incubators and accelerators? Is the government behind anything? Last week we had a presentation about Singapore. One of the well-known ones in Singapore is Block 71.
Yeah.
Is there anything similar like that in Hong Kong?
So you can always check ChatGPT. They probably tell you, but I think the accelerators are. I would say the main ones would be, of course, the ones from Hong Kong Science Park. So
HKSTP.
So as I mentioned, there are two main hubs, like startup hubs. One is Cyberport. So these are more like fintech companies and maybe some tech related companies. But I think
that's kind of downtown.
That's where Cyberport. Cyberport is like we're in Hong Kong. So it's a little bit further up is Sha Tin, which is closer to Shenzhen side. That's where the Hong Kong Science Park, I would say 80%. Don't quote me on that. Maybe of all the kind of startup activity is there. And Hong Kong Science has done a very good job, at least trying to create the acceleration programs that to support different stages of startups. For example, they would have the initial, which is the Uni-Bio, or Uni-Bio is specifically for us, right? For biotechs, but there's an InQ program which provides, I think, 2 million Hong Kong dollars of support. And then they have that ecosystem to provide them. And then the one that we are in, there's another one which is scale up one, but then there's one which is the later stage, which is elite program. So these are the harder ones. These are the growth stage companies that we are also part of that. They provide 21.5 million Hong Kong dollars of support. and this is around $3 million US. So it's a sizable check, and then they obviously have the venture funds as well to support any companies they think are worth supporting, the top companies within the ecosystem, right? So there are these accelerators that are more government driven, because Hong Kong Science Park is quasi-government, okay, even though they say they're not government, right? But the management, they could do their own kind of, they're allowed to move to decide on their own path, right? So I would say quasi, but there are also a lot of companies now, bigger companies like the Shanghai pharmaceutical companies, or the China Resources, either state-owned or not, or like large companies such as Tiger Med, they're the biggest CRO in China. They're creating ecosystem related incubation or accelerators within Hong Kong. So I'm actually the I sit in the IC, the investment committee of one accelerator called the Tiger Jade Pebble. So this is affiliated to, as I said, Tiger Med, and our idea is to be able to leverage the Hong Kong ecosystem, biotech companies or biopharmaceutical or medical device company, anything healthcare related. If you want to soft land in Hong Kong for Asia or for China, and use Hong Kong as a hub, right? We can consider that, we can make an investment, and we can kind of pull the strings that are required to support this company, right? So our team has a very vast network of, at least locally or regionally, a very vast network of resources there. Yeah.
So really, Hong Kong was a hub that was very close to southern China and sort of, a great jumping off place for the rest of China.
Yeah.
How do you see things with Southeast Asia, Hong Kong relations? I mean, you're active in Singapore.
Yeah. I would say Singapore is more a competitor. Always been a competitor for Hong Kong. So we beat them obviously in the financial markets by far. But I think Singapore is very good at what they do in certain areas. Like, I was talking to, I've worked in Singapore for 3 years. Obviously the people are very smart there. A lot of talent.
I'm guessing, I'm kind of getting to sort of the US-China geopolitical tension thing.
Yeah.
And really, it used to look like Hong Kong was the jumping off place to China.
Yeah.
Singapore, you could look at Southeast Asia, you could look at India, you could look up at China.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if there's kind of more interest in developing operations in Southeast Asia from Hong Kong now.
I would say it's definitely impacted, right?
Okay.
There's definitely less like expats, especially kind of from the West, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are moving to Singapore. There are a lot of family office that move to Singapore as well. But I think for tech, I think generally speaking, I would love to be naive enough to believe that geopolitics don't play as big a role. I would say, but capital is different, right? So sometimes capital, the tech follows the capital, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think, especially in Singapore, they have their nexus. We have our tech nexus, right? I think we're very different. Singapore cannot replace, I would say, Hong Kong for access to China. I think never. So if you still want to access China, and you want a more neutral kind of region, I think Hong Kong is still relatively the only place to go.
Okay. There's kind of a long question that came in from a regular participant in these programs who is coming in from Recife, Brazil, live. So I'm going to read Paulo's question for everybody. It's kind of a long one, forgive me. Paulo writes, I've been doing ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, in deep tech, but I didn't know anyone around here in Brazil doing that. I didn't even know there was a word for that. Could you please expand your thoughts on ETA? Specifically, he says that as a professor and a deep tech entrepreneur in AI, a lot of the people who get into entrepreneurship look for me to help out too late when their early stage startups are already bankrupt. In many cases, there's no way to save them. But I ended up investing in a prop tech and in another agri-tech startups, which had great chances of becoming unicorns. That did require his, kind of not just money, but his help in the process. And he thinks they're going to grow at least tenfold in revenues for the next 4 years. Is ETA really important? Or just kind of once in a while it happens?
Mm, well, it's very difficult to answer that question. Is it important or not? I think it just comes down to the opportunity. My understanding of ETA more the traditional means, right? You do sometimes leverage yourself.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an LBO, leverage buyout. So you would borrow money to do it because sometimes you just don't have the money to do it. But with a little bit of starting capital and like that can see that most of the time ETA is done on very traditional business. They already have some type of cash flow, right, to support the loan that you're going to be leveraging yourself to buy that company, right? So I don't see it as much in tech companies per se.
Yeah, if I can add my thinking to this, you're right. It has to do with kind of traditional industries where people, as they get older, it kind of becomes harder and harder to think outside the box.
Exactly.
And so you need somebody new coming in who can put together the resources to do an acquisition and really make it happen.
Yes.
But I think that kind of opportunity is something really to watch as Asian societies age.
Yeah, you're right.
This is something really, there's a lot of potential.
I think I also remember that there are also seeker funds available where these funds, they actually seek for these opportunities. And you can get involved with these seeker funds, right? If that's something that you want to do.
Yeah. So gotta mention the elephant in the room again. So US, China kind of competition, tension, that kind of thing. What do you think that's doing to the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Hong Kong?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, but I do think that I think geopolitics. I'm not a geopolitics political expert in any way. Okay, just to mention.
And this is your personal.
This is a personal view.
Perspective.
I think geopolitics is definitely here to stay. And I think it's not anything new, right? Especially when if you read Ray Dalio's book, right, about kind of the histories and the big great nations, right? There's always going to be the two top forces will always fight, right? I think it's inevitable in many ways, right? So this happened, I think, 30 years, 40 years ago when the Japanese and the US were fighting against the DRAMs and the chips and stuff. And right now, China and the US is doing the same thing, right? And I think as if China continues this growth trajectory, I think this will either intensify or it'll just get more difficult. So how does that kind of impact startups in Hong Kong? Of course, it does impact it. But I do, firstly, a couple of points I would say I would share. I think investors especially, right, they're easily kind of fazed by all this kind of noise, right? They seem to be the most sophisticated, but they always are the most media sensitive, right? But I would add a comment that the investors that are going to invest in you, they don't really care about the geopolitics because they already know, right? So it's the ones that they don't want to invest in you, and they will use reasons to. And this is a good excuse, right? Great excuse. You can't blame, but you can easily blame political reasons. So I think in Hong Kong, especially and recently, what has really impacted us or just startups in general, and I'm thinking that this is globally, maybe not even in the US, right? It's just market fundamentals, right? So obviously the geopolitics drive a lot of uncertainty in the market. There are not less IPO opportunities even in the US and in China. So that's one. Inflation is still relatively high, right? Very sticky. So interest rates are still very, very high, right? So a lot of investors, they don't have cheap money anymore, right? Cost of capital is extremely high, right? So a lot of people don't want to take too much risk, right? And what you're seeing right now is even though the value, if you look at the Q1 numbers for venture capital, the value is the highest in 4 years or something like that, right? The number of deals have gone down significantly, the lowest in 4 years, right? Meaning that there's huge deals, right? And especially the deals in this part of the world, the region, especially Bay Area, I think 60 or 70% of all the deals done or the values are done in the US.
100 million or whatever,
And then there's a number of ones I think another 50% of that is actually done in the Bay Area. It's very, very concentrated. So what you see now is that there are a lot of the deals are very expensive in the US, right? Especially this part of time. And this kind of inefficiency in market has caused a lot of, we have similar companies, maybe not as high quality in Asia, and especially in Hong Kong, but we are if you compare to kind of our Western counterparts, which are US counterparts, we're very cheap. We're very, very cheap, right? So there is like opportunities here.
Yeah.
There are very savvy investors are kind of engaging in this kind of price arbitrage, you would say, because the markets are not efficient anymore. And for example, even in our biotech industry, there's a lot of like what we call setting up new cos in the US. There's a lot of good assets, good science in China or in Hong Kong. They out-license it into a separate entity in the US. And then they raise money, right, with a predominant U.S. team, right, and this way there's less of a geopolitical concern in that sense, right. So this is happening right now, and there are a lot of kind of innovative structures that are happening because that there are good science, good technology in Asia and Hong Kong that can be kind of leveraged in the U.S.
Yeah, so for those of you who heard my opening presentation in this series, the three big elements, right? You've got knowledge, you've got people, you've got capital. Hong Kong definitely still has the capital. It does have a lot of the knowledge that's available.
Yep.
In terms of the people, we talked a little bit about the labor force. I think that what would you say are the biggest kind of differentiating advantages of doing something in Hong Kong?
Differentiating.
Well, if you're going to do something, why do it in Hong Kong as opposed to Shanghai or as opposed to Singapore or Dubai or even New York?
Yeah, I think this is the age-old question that the government always try to push Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just the typical ones. I'd say compared to Chinese cities, like for example, city, I think one of the is the rule of law, right? I think that's the key thing. Rule of law has always been kind of the cornerstone for any kind of capital or kind of, you could say, capitalism, right? That happens.
It reduces a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. So I think Hong Kong, we're still under kind of I think common law. So and we have our own kind of separate, independent kind of judiciary kind of system.
Yeah.
So that's a big advantage in working compared to in China. And also sometimes I've been in a couple of kind of legal battles in China as well. It's very difficult, especially if you're with a local partner, even though we are considered relatively domestic companies. Yeah. But there are different courts in different areas, and especially if your partner is in a more rural area, there's still a lot of kind of relationship-driven kind of decisions on legal kind of battles, practically, per se, which we would lack practically. In Hong Kong, you're still very, very independent, right? So I think that's the biggest advantage, right? And I think the other thing that cannot be replaced is the culture in Hong Kong. Even though we don't have that kind of fun entrepreneur kind of culture yet, I would say we're still a very international city.
Actually, I think you've picked up on something that they don't talk nearly enough about in regard to regions of innovation and entrepreneurship. Yeah. Entrepreneurs will go to a place where they want to live.
Yeah.
The quality of the food, the quality of the life, is a big factor.
Yeah, yeah. And we have, as I said, we have great hiking trails. We have the best food. The top 50 best bars in Asia. The top one is in Hong Kong as well. Italian girl called Bar Leung, and then Koa is another one. I don't work for them, but I love going to these kind of nice bars. But it's all in Hong Kong, right? Obviously, Singapore has really good kind of bars and kind of nightlife as well, per se. Right? But a lot of my Singaporean friends also say if they're single, they'd rather be in Hong Kong, right? I think Singapore is better for raising a family, I would say. Okay. Education is one of the biggest problems in Hong Kong right now.
So let's pause for a minute and open the floor to questions from the audience. Is that a question? Go ahead.
So thank you so much for speaking today. You were mentioning how like the environment in Hong Kong really fosters kind of like business management. But why do you feel like there's still a lot of kind of like hesitancy to like join the startup industry? And do you think the Hong Kong government is pushing more still to kind of maintain the city's status as an international financial hub? Or would you say that they're actually pushing to like be more focused on, for example, like the Greater Bay Area, kind of creating like the new Silicon Valley, and so kind of pushing for more like AI innovation. Yeah, sorry, that was a kind of like full loaded question.
Well, so can I ask, like, what gives you the impression that there's still hesitancy to do these startups? Is it
Oh,
something I said, or?
yes, you mentioned that the community within Hong Kong uses relatively like low risk,
Yeah.
and like people are there's not such a big vibrant like, entrepreneurship mindset,
Yeah.
and so that's why I was kind of like wondering.
Yeah,
Where,
I won't say they're low risk. Everyone in Hong Kong are hustlers practically. They want to make money and they want to make money fast. So that's what we call the Lion Rock kind of mentality, right? We're very hardworking as well, or at least used to. I think the issue is, I think it comes back to cost of living, right? I mean, cost of living is extremely high, rent is very high, food is very high, and there's still a lot of uncertainty whether or not a startup can live, right? And whether or not they can pay their bills and their employees, right? So I think that's I would say the biggest problem Hong Kong will have, and that's one of the reasons why the Hong Kong Science Park knows that there's this issue. So there are kind of projects which I can share later on, to kind of support accommodation as well. So they've just built this really nice continual cell right next to Hong Kong Science Park, almost like a student dormitory, but it's like a very high end student dormitory, very nice, right? And they have a band room, they have like kitchen, like shared kitchens everywhere, so you can like really mingle with your fellow entrepreneurs. Very nice. Um, I think there will be more of these projects, and one of the biggest project in Hong Kong, which it's the kind of what we call the Northern Metropolis, right? So it's an area I think spanning 33,000 hectares. Which I googled how big Palo Alto is, right? I think it's 5 times the size of Palo Alto. Okay, and that's all going to be dedicated to INT, right? Innovation and technology. Of course, not everything is INT. There will be a lot of real estate for living, right, to support the entrepreneurs there. But the core of that would be there would be a very big area for wet labs or AI, because AI and biotech is one of the two pillars supported by Hong Kong's government, right, for long term. The other one is fintech, and the other is, I think, it's smart city, right? These are the four kind of pillars, right? So that project is a mega project um, in a strategic level. It's not even a Hong Kong thing. It's like a like whole China thing.
Yeah.
Right? So, and the idea, as I said, is to kind of solve some of the kind of housing crisis things that the real estate problem, and to better integrate, because integration is going to happen regardless of Hong Kong into the Greater Bay Area. So, if for those who don't know about the Greater Bay Area, it's a strategic 5-year, many-year roadmap by the Chinese government to build the kind of to integrate a lot of the cities and the whole that area, including 11, 12 cities, including Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Macau is one of them. Hong Kong is, those are kind of key to become what we call like you can travel 1 hour to any of these cities, right? Within 1 hour, right? And they're going to integrate everything into a huge kind of INT hub, practically. That's the idea, right? So there are a lot of pushes there. And that's one of the big ones that's happening right now. And I think they've already started the kind of buildings, right? So I don't know, in 5, 10 years, hopefully we can see more and talk more about that. But it's still very early stages.
So if I can kind of follow up on that just briefly, diversification means not being overly dependent on the financial industry, right? Which makes very good sense, right? If markets go down in one area, you want to be able to rise in another, and they see these areas of rising. Go ahead.
And then all the way from Australia, so good to meet you in this side of the planet. My question is, so in bio, you need three things in general for the ecosystem to work well. You need talent and IP, capital, and also strategic and big pharma sort of involvement. Can you comment on the third one, big pharma and strategic involvement in Hong Kong and your perspectives?
Yeah, I think this is somewhere which I would say Hong Kong doesn't do too good a job in to bring in the big pharmas. So one thing I did complain, what I think Singapore did well was was investing in like $1 billion US. I can't remember with AstraZeneca to build that kind of big site in Singapore, the ADC site, right in Singapore. That's a very smart move, I personally think, because Hong Kong I think they require more of these big pharmaceutical companies, or even just the kind of the leaders in the pharmaceutical industry in China to set up some type of site in Hong Kong where it's manufactured to kind of train the next generation of engineers, right? So I think Hong Kong lacks that kind of very industrialized engineer, like what do you call it, like translating kind of scientific research into something that is a product, right? I think this is where we are missing that kind of, but we have Shenzhen across the line. So maybe it's not the right move or a strategic move from a government's point of view to do that, because then you're kind of replicating Shenzhen. So I would say that's the biggest disadvantage in Hong Kong. But of course, as you mentioned, Hong Kong, we have, especially Greater Bay Area in Hong Kong, we have the top universities in Asia, right? We have Hong Kong U, we have CU, right? These are top in Asia, right? A lot of good basic science. But unfortunately, that basic science is not efficiently translated into anything that's too lucrative at this point in time. Yeah.
It's almost like a missing puzzle piece that the government perhaps should be.
Yeah, they are doing. They have a lot of push, as I say, reindustrialization. They have a lot of good slogans, and they do try. But I Hong Kong is just too expensive for manufacturing. So, and I think going back to that northern metropolis thing, maybe that's what they're trying to do, right? Maybe being able to, because Hong Kong still has a lot of land, and a lot of this is just like national parks, a lot of land that can be commercialized, you can say, right? But of course, they haven't done that yet, even though we're a small city.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask, what's your view on the recent funding cuts in the US, especially in the biomedical research space? Because a lot of the scientific innovation, like especially the translational research that you mentioned, like US is a major hub for this. Do you envision this policy will affect the translational projects and how it's going to affect the biotech industry?
In the US, you're talking
Yeah,
about?
in the US.
The funding. Honestly, I'm not a expert in what's happening in the US. I know it's happening. I can't really comment on that. I'm sorry. Like, but I'm sure.
So one thing is, by not commenting on it, it means that people who are being entrepreneurs in other parts of the world are not seizing on opportunities yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that everybody's waiting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. I just hear a lot of complaining like from my industry, just like everyone's complaining, but we don't know the impact that might happen. I'm sure it's going to be negative, and there's a lot of good basic science that is actually, I would say, at least in Singapore, a lot of the basic science, good entrepreneurs, they require these grants to support these basic science, right? I'm sure it's the same in the US, right? So you're actually losing a lot of kind of good progress. And it's just one of those things that once you stop, it's hard to restart as well, right? It takes a long time to gain that momentum. So I definitely think it's damaging for many ways. And a lot of scientists requires these grants, right? That's, at least I'm talking to Singapore. Yeah.
Right. Back in the back.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I wanted to ask a question that I think you might have somewhat of a unique insight into. You obviously made the decision to take over the family business and really lead it over a transformation. I was wondering how you see kind of the attitude amongst some of your peers, other folks in Hong Kong who are in the position to inherit family businesses or have inherited family businesses, their enthusiasm or their attitude towards doubling down on the family business in Hong Kong, and possibly like investing in innovation versus, say, diversifying out of Hong Kong or just maintaining the family business as is, especially in like retail or real estate, but in your case, pharma.
I mean, there's all sorts of people, and they have different kind of how they view their career path, I would say. I don't know if it's the people I kind of know, a lot of them decide to take on their family businesses, right? Of course, there's some that are huge, right? They're very they're not taking over like the cool part, right? The investment side or non-operational stuff, right? So they're part of buy side, so it's an easier life. It's fun as well. You get to go to the NVIDIA events and the Meta events and all these events as well, right? So very cool when you go to CES, right? So you get to see a lot. So a lot of people tend to go into that if they're bigger family offices and they have their if they're part of the family business, but they have a family office, they tend to build a family office, right? That's one. But I do have friends who are similar to me, where we've decided to take on part of the operations as well. Another friend who does a very traditional chemical dyeing company. So they used to dye and actually process textiles, right, for a lot of big companies, right, including Nike, including I think that's a lot of polo brands as well, right. But what you see that it really depends because he's a chemical engineer in heart. He likes these kind of like the kind of details of operations, right? Not many people like that, honestly speaking. And you're managing in China, especially chemicals business, right? You're managing people who are maybe not even from high school, right? They didn't graduate from high school. They're not easy to manage at all, right? So it really depends on your personality. But he's actually moving his factory now into Vietnam as well. So he's diversifying away. So it really depends on who from the family business side. But a lot of it, in China, in Hong Kong, especially the big family businesses are either real estate. So those are, as I said, they're very cash, already a lot of cash, right? So they can do a lot of investments. They don't need to do much operations there. The other side is textiles. Textiles are really big in Hong Kong, right? So these are kind of the two areas that I see, depending on the situation. And then, if you go to Macau, it's just the Macau casino guys, right? And they have big family offices as well, right, to do investment.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, could you share a little bit of tips? You said that the startups can also pitch to the early stage family office,
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah.
So what's the tips you can share? Because to my, knowledge, I think a family office usually just invest the institutional fund or VC because they are more professional, right? So would you like to share a little bit?
I think there are a lot of ones that will do direct investment, I would say, especially the little bit larger ones where they strategically see a fit to some of their businesses, right? They normally invest through their own balance sheet. So my view of this, I think it's very simple. Like any investor, you just have to find the right fit, right family. That's number one. Take a look at what there's like resources like PitchBook, right? Take a look at what similar companies are, what they've invested in, right? Or they do direct investments. That's number one. So that's part of their mandate. I think the second thing is, of course, then building that relationship is very important, right? I think I always try to do things a bit more informal at the start. I don't make it too business, right? And through my network, either through the alumni groups or through some other friends of friends, somehow I always find that person. Because Hong Kong is very small. There's even globally, I think it's like we're 3 degrees away from everyone, right? In Hong Kong, maybe you're 2 degrees, and you can find someone. So there's always someone that you can find that knows that person, right? And try to just get to know them and try to just be a little bit more informal. That's at least how I generated a lot of relationships. Either just because I was just hanging out or just I drink with them, right? They love drinking sometimes, some of them. So there are a lot of events or activities you can do. So just to generate that kind of relationship.
So the follow-up question is that you would prefer to invest the entrepreneur all over the world or just Hong Kong based or Silicon based or China based?
So honestly, right now, as I said, because capital is so expensive, cash is king. And actually, a lot of these family offices have a lot of cash, right? At least the one that we know very well, they have a lot of cash, right? But the mentality is very similar to most investors nowadays, which coming back to where I came, no one wants to take risks. So no one is seeking for alpha right now. Everyone is only doing beta investing, which means you just invest in the biggest deals. For example, the biggest deals in Silicon Valley, right? You invest in these deals. If these deals fail, even the AZ and everyone, they've
ASICS,
invested.
they
Yeah,
invested,
ASICS, everyone invested, right? It's not my fault, right?
Yeah.
So no one is looking for that alpha, right? I personally think. So it's definitely difficult nowadays because, as I say, cost of capital is it's very hard to come by, right? And
Well, the cost of capital is high. Do you think the AI companies price themselves too high?
I think so.
Startup? Yeah, okay.
No, some of the startups in my industry is extreme. I would say a lot.
Raising extreme amounts of money.
You're not lead, you just follow.
A lot of they like to follow, right? Hardly they lead, unless they have, as I said, some of the bigger names like Namfeng that are specifically in our vertical, right? They have a sophisticated kind of team to look into it. They can lead, yeah. So it really depends on the kind of the family office as well. There are a lot of smaller family offices, and a lot of rich individuals in Hong Kong, very rich. At the end of the day, is if they trust you or not. I think that's the key. Right? So I think all VC investments, especially early stages, depending on the person. So that's why it's very important to generate that relationship. As I mentioned, especially early stage investors, for early stage startups, that word of mouth is it makes a big difference. So if you have a friend who knows that family office, the decision maker, and he says something good about you, or she says something good about you, it goes a long way. It's all trust.
So 10 years from now, if we come back and we're talking about biotech and pharma, what do you think the kind of state of the art, where do you think will be, what will be interesting topics then?
Well, going back to what I mentioned about the Northern Metropolis, I hope to see that in fruition. It's a huge mega project, and it's INT. There will be a lot more money and a lot more kind of opportunities there. If you guys have a chance to take a look at it, there are a lot. It's quite exciting, but it's a difficult project because it's so big, right? That's number one. Specifically for our industry, I think Hong Kong has always tried to kind of pushed in two areas.
Yeah.
So if you do want to start up and you're in the biomedical, there's two areas. I think CGT, so cell gene therapy, is one that Hong Kong might have some advantage for two reasons. I think firstly, specifically in China, you can do investigate IATs, right? Investigating initiated trials, right? This is a framework which is very unique to China. You don't need to get FDA approval to do this, right? And a lot of US companies CGT companies are doing IAT-related trials just to generate enough first-in-human data and then go fundraise. So there are a lot of these opportunities, and in Hong Kong, they see this as a potential niche. Don't forget, Hong Kong is still very expensive. Real estate is so expensive. So everything they think about what they support is how do we get the most return on the limited kind of real estate that we have, right? So CGT is very interesting because, especially cell therapy, you don't really need a huge manufacturer. Everything can be done within maybe just this room, very good. So the kind of ROI per kind of square meter is very high, right? That's one I think would be interesting to see if Hong Kong can really kind of flourish in CGT, especially cell therapy. And quite recently, actually, next to the Chinese University in Hong Kong, there's a manufacturing for cell therapy. It's a very state-of-the-art. The government invested in it. Not many people are using it, so there's that opportunity to use that and leverage on that platform. So CGT is one. I think the other is like anything AI plus healthcare related. I talked about the two verticals. Right? AI is definitely one. Healthcare is another. Hong Kong has a lot of data, especially that it's fragmented in the kind of our healthcare system. So if you can be able to utilize that data, would be great. Another thing is that there are a lot of good case studies. So quite recently, Crystal Pi, which is a group, MIT founded company, now they're usually $3 billion US. They listed in Hong Kong, ATC. So they're a very successful case. Another one that just filed a perspective is in silico. So if you go into ChatGPT type top AI companies that are doing drug discovery, this will come out, right? In silico. This is a Hong Kong founded company as well, listing. So there are a lot of AI plus companies or enabled companies that are coming out of Hong Kong, and coming back, it's because, as I said, I think the scalability and the leverage that Hong Kong they need to find that scalability in Hong Kong. Real estate is so limited, right? So these are two areas that I think Hong Kong might be able to find a niche. I would say, because I would say Hong Kong would be very similar to kind of Bay Area or San Francisco, where we're more on the an AI plus, and then
Yeah.
Boston would be like Silicon, would be Shanghai. And
Yeah.
that would be kind of my analogy. Right? Yeah,
comparison, I
good comparison.
Yeah.
So a lot of the big pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies and the traditional ones are in Shanghai right now. So I see maybe that this Hong Kong might be able to have that kind of niche there.
Okay, that sounds good. And this is a good time, I think, for us to move to a more informal kind of conversation over some refreshments. Thanks so much for a really interesting